Okay, so thank you all for being here. We are officially 47 days away from our election, and we are 19 days away from the end of voter registration, which is another important thing to note, but we'll talk a little about those dates and deadlines at the end. We are going to cover the district and levy information this evening, and by that I mean Mr. Dick and Ms. Bradford have collected a massive amount of information, our frequently asked questions, the things people are the most concerned about, the things that maybe one person's asked that other people are going to be like, oh, I've always wondered that. So we have a lot of information to share. There are notepads on the tables if anyone has any questions. Mallory is going to if you have one, raise it up. She'll help us get those. So at the end, we will take anyone's questions. We are really, really committed, and we have been throughout this entire campaign, to making sure what we say is accurate. And sometimes accurate isn't instant, right? I was thinking today that I know my son has had all of his vaccinations and all of his immunizations and all of that, but I can't tell you what any of that is without having that paper right in front of me. So that's kind of what I liken to how we share our information. If you write your name and email or phone number down on the paper, if we aren't able to answer it immediately this evening, it is 100% our goal to get that answered within the next few days, and then post that on our frequently asked questions section of both the district document and the levy page document. Mr. Kern, if you would like to, Brandon's going to kick us off, and then Mr. Dick and Ms. Bradford will cover a very, very thorough bit of information.
Okay, well, thank you, first of all, on behalf of the board for being here tonight. For those who are going to be watching the video out in the world of the internet, we thank you for aiming to be informed, an informed decision maker. That's all we can really ask in the end, right? It's for you to collect the information you need to make the decision as how to best support our school district. And so I just appreciate the fact that we have a group of people here and those who are going to take the time to watch this on the internet, maybe at a later time. I just wanted to share a few things. As I came onto the board, and several members came onto the board, and I know, my fellow board members as a whole, we hear a lot, right, from the community about, what's the issue with the school, a lot of suggestions about things we could do better. But I think overall, there are really some, 4 or 5 overarching themes that I know I've heard, and I think my fellow board members have heard as well. And that's, we want to see improved communication with the community. We want to see more transparency in how the board operates and how the school district operates. We want to see more community engagement from the school district. And we want more accountability for some of the decisions that are made about how the school is governed and administered. And I think those are all very fair things. And I think there's a lot of things that we have done as of late to try and address each and every one of those things. In my mind, if you look at communications, Mr. Dick has taken the lead in helping us put out a new newsletter that's going to all community members. Fantastic newsletter, quite frankly, that is loaded full of great information to try and keep the community informed about what's going on a day-to-day basis here. We've had an enhanced social media presence over the last couple of years, and we've aimed to make our website more user-friendly, particularly for parents who are looking for information about the day-to-day operations of the school district. I know that's an important thing for parents out there. If you look at transparency, I can tell you from a board perspective, we have made a strong commitment to minimize any use of executive session. So, a lot of times there are people in the community who have a lot of concerns about boards going into executive session, making closed-door decisions. I think we have minimized that, and we use that very sparingly only when the letter of the law allows us to do that. The rest of the time, that discussion's happening up here. And sometimes that makes for maybe some uncomfortable conversations. Sometimes that leads to board members needing to ask pretty pointed questions of members of the leadership team or each other. here in the public eye, but you know what? At least the public knows those conversations are going on when we do those things and not behind closed doors. And to that end, now, here recently, we've started to stream our board meetings through streaming video. So everybody in the community has access to be able to see what those conversations are and understand the decision-making and the logic that the school board and leadership team has as we go about making those decisions. And I think that's pretty important in terms of transparency. In terms of community engagement, we've made 2 significant strides just in the last year. First and foremost was our community survey, which we put out, in which every member of this community had an opportunity to chime in, to give their feedback, to identify concerns they had, to tell us what they liked, what they didn't like about the school district. And so I think we had a great response to that survey, and we've used that now as we've tried to govern and move forward. And that led directly into a strategic planning session in which we invited a number of members from the community and our school leadership team and our staff to be a part of plotting out what is the vision for Amanda-Clearcreek in the future and how do we go about achieving that vision. And that was, I think, a great success in which we were able to get a lot of collaboration, a lot of engagement from the community to help inform our decision-making moving forward. You know, on accountability, this is a work in progress, right? And we are, as a board and as the administrative leadership team, is working to tackle our budget issue. I think that's a large reason why we're here tonight. The levy helps support. That's just a piece of the budgeting that goes along with the school district. That's just one side of it, one small piece of revenue for the school district that we quite frankly need. But we're working on tackling that issue, and I think there's some things in the work that are important for community members to note that we'll be talking about a lot here in the near future. One, that's to responsibly define what we hold as our cash balance in the district. I know this has been a huge issue for a lot of community members. The fact that a lot of people have felt over the past few years that we've had a cash balance which was too large, holding on to taxpayer dollars, or I can tell you that from fiscal year 2016, where that cash balance was about 86% of our prior year's operating expenses, we just closed out this past fiscal year, and that cash balance is only about 55, just a little over 55% of our prior year's operating expenses. So in 3 fiscal years, you can see where that cash balance now is relatively smaller compared to what our prior year operating expenses are. And we know when we close out this next fiscal year, we're going to be closer to 40% than we are 50%. And so I think that's important to remind the community that we've had to balance the budget these last few years by pulling from our rainy day fund. And I think that's important to note. But we have to define what is a responsible level of funds to retain as a rainy day fund and what should be reinvested back into the school. When taxpayers give us dollars, we have a responsibility to reinvest that into the kids, reinvest that into the operations of the school, or to not ask for more than what we need on that front. So that's something that the board, there's a very important finance committee meeting that's going to happen tomorrow night actually, and board action here in the next couple of meetings. We're going to define those things and take action to change our policies to be able to address those things. On that note, we're going to change our budgeting process as well. The board is working on changing the budgeting process to be able to present to the community a budget that's more easy to understand. It's a little more black and white. You can understand exactly where our expenditure needs are, how our revenue and income comes in, and something that's easier to present to the community, which is important. And I think the last piece of the budgeting and the accountability standpoint is something that we've had to, Mr. Dick, forego a lot of maintenance here recently because of our uncertainty about our budget. And there's been a lot of deferred maintenance, and we have beautiful buildings, right? We have beautiful buildings and a beautiful campus that we have to start to outline the capital needs that we need to be able to maintain those facilities for our kids. And I think that's something that we haven't done a lot of lately, and it's something that's drastically needed. And I think those capital needs are pretty significant. So as we start to outline those and define those in real dollars and cents for the community, I think that's something that's important for the community to know and understand just what those needs are, and something that quite frankly they can relate to, is putting it back into buildings and an investment in your infrastructure. infrastructure, which is critical to helping students learn. So in the end though, we're here because of the kids. These are all adult governing issues, right? All those adult governing issues are about ensuring that this place has the support of the community so that we can provide a great education for kids. And I guess my final message to those of you who are watching, those of you who are here tonight, you know, we operate with the lowest amount of locally generated tax revenue compared to any other school district in our county. Okay, we're raising the fewest amount of dollars per pupil from local tax revenue avenues. You think about your home expenses over the last 5 years. They've certainly gone up. If your paycheck hasn't gone up, you're probably feeling the same pain that the school district's looking at as well. You know, if you don't have a cost of living adjustment to go along with those increased expenses, you're probably feeling the same type of pain that the school district's feeling, right? Because largely our income has been stagnant. It's been stagnant or even declining from state-supported resources. Certainly has been declining from local resources since we've lost the income tax levy that we used to have from back in 2011. And so that presents great challenges for us. And I think another piece that's important to remember is that there's, Jill, I think we'll talk a little bit about this, but there's a significant lag between the time that we gain approval of the levy and the time that we collect those resources and we have those available to put into the budget. An entire year, really, from the time, depending on what time of year you pass that levy. And so, for those of you who are looking at the cash balance and things like that, think about what that's going to be a year from now, really, not what it is right now, because that'll be the situation we face. That's how much time it takes to be able to pass a tax levy, have that come into law, and actually make the collection on that tax levy to actually have revenue in hand to be able to make it a part of our budget. So I think that's an important part. But again, it's about educating the kids, and the bottom line is that if we don't have additional revenue, if we don't have additional public local support for the school district and our operations, there are going to be operational cuts. And the operational cuts are going to be painful. They're going to be painful for kids, and they're going to be painful for families. And in the end, they'll be painful for this community as a whole. Because it's my belief that this school district and the school is really the lifeblood of this community. I mean, it is the centerpiece. It always has been. And so goes the community as the school district goes, I believe. So I'm happy to help answer any questions, let the administrative leadership team go through their presentation, but I will be here to help answer questions if you have some. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kern. Well, many of the questions that we're going to have on the screen tonight are, you can find them at aceslevy.com, I believe it is, and they're also on our webpage. The questions that we're drawing from for this presentation. As Mr. Kern mentioned, or Mrs. Bowers mentioned, we started collecting questions before I got here in 2017. Each time someone asks a question, we just add to it with the answer. And as Mrs. Bowers mentioned, if tonight we don't have the answer for you, I assure you we'll get one to you shortly. Your question will be taken, and if it's not on the list, it will be added to the list so that it's a comprehensive list. It's quite lengthy. If you go on it's about 20 pages, I think, so of questions. So hopefully you can find all the information there. So to get started, I don't know. I think you can either look at these as high-level questions or low-level questions. I don't know which one they are in regards to what you know or don't know. But we talk about what kind of levy we're running on November 5th, and it is a 2% earned income tax that the board approved, I think, in June or the 1st of July. And it was for 15 years. One of the reasons we went to the 15-year route is to try to get away from the cycle of the 5-year renewal piece that we were hearing that there was voter fatigue in regards to us coming back all the time asking for taxes or renewals or whatever. So that is one of the reasons we have chosen to go the 15-year route.
One of the other things is in our strategic planning committee, financial health was one of the goals. It was long-term financial health also. And so one of the things, like Mr. Dick had said, that 15 years is a generation. It's our kindergartners starting and going through their 12th grade with no law and funding for that.
What is it? School district income tax. It's an income tax that's separate from everything else. It's one of the reasons that we need it, because of the fact that we cannot use federal tax dollars, we cannot use state tax dollars to fund. Well, we use them, we don't get them separately from income tax. So,
School district income tax is just for your local residents. It's for anyone who lives within your school district. And there's two types. There's a traditional and there's an earned. And we are doing the earned this time. So, and income tax cannot be just put forth. It does have to be voted by the residents. So who pays the tax? Anybody, like I said, anybody who lives in our school district will pay that tax. If you're a part-time resident, say you're lucky enough to be able to live here during summer and Florida in the winter, you're only going to be paying that tax as if you are considered a part-time resident on the income that is coming in at that time. So workers of our school district, if they do not live here, they're not going to be paying the taxes, and that's with any business that's here in our school district.
many times it's asked, what is taxed? We have put this out in many places. The most important thing we got to make sure that Social Security is not taxed. It does not happen. So that's one of the things our senior citizens are concerned about, and that's taken into consideration when we chose the earned income tax, because it does not affect Social Security as well as a traditional tax. However, an earned income tax does not affect retirements for most retirements. They're listed here. And the thing is many times people talk about it's a W-2 tax, and that's basically how it works. If you have a W-2, it's going to get taxed. If you don't, it usually doesn't get taxed, unless it does affect farmers, businesses, and things like that, so that don't get taxed as much.
And we've updated this with the new biennium budget. They had made some adjustments to the earned income tax to kind of close a loophole that was in it. So you'll see where self-employment income on earned income tax is the MAGI, and that's the modified adjusted gross income. I'm not a CPA or a tax person at that. However, this is all updated. You'll see that an earned income tax does tax self-employment income according to the modified adjusted gross income. You'll see earned income tax does not tax the self-employment income of the Ohio adjusted gross income. So there are two different things, but this is updated from what the biennium budget did with that loophole. Okay.
Very important for you to talk to your tax person,
Yes.
because it is different for each person files differently, I'm assuming, than I or someone else does. So.
Correct. So why do we need this levy at this time? The fact is we've had decreased revenues, we've had increased expenditures, and we've made a lot of different cuts and savings. I like to think that if we can get the same service for a cheaper price, that's a savings on us. I don't like the cuts, and that a cut in my mind is where we actually have to cut that service. So back in 17-18, if you remember, we cut about $1.2 million. They were cuts and savings together, and this was to try to just be able to get our spending a little bit into focus. We were checking out different programs and things like that. So even with that, with our May 2019 forecast, we're still going to be deficit spending $2.3 million. And so what that means is we're spending $2.3 million more than what we're bringing in. So our revenues, say, are $15 million. Our expenditures are going to be the $18 million. So here, that we're spending more than what we're actually bringing in. So when we are deficit spending, we are going into that cash balance that we have, and that's what is helping us to still maintain what we're operating with.
One of the reasons also is, and you'll, I think it's later on the slides, but is our funding has declined, not only at the state level, but at the federal level. when I was a superintendent in 2001 through 2008. Our state funding in 2001 was somewhere in the neighborhood of 72 to 73% of our revenue. Well, when it gets reduced to 56%, 17 years later, you can imagine what you would be like if your household went from a decrease by 16 to 17% on your revenue.
So what we did was we did a financial overview, and it was just, what we did was, you'll see the blue here is our revenue without the income tax, and this is based on the 5-year forecast. We just got our new budget, and the state budget alone was frozen. So when we look out on a 5-year forecast and we go out numerous years, the further you get out, the more foggy it might be, but we have to do that per ODE's recommendations, ORC code. We still have to put that all through. So our best estimates are what is a snapshot of what we have today and what those trends are going out. So when we're looking at that, I don't go in and say, okay, we're going to lose funding here, here, and here, because my trend is I'm going to try to keep it the same. You'll see this blue line. We're trying to keep it the same. That's what we know for right now. So our revenue with the income tax is the red line. So if this levy passes in November, we'll start receiving some funds in FY20. That will start coming in here. So this is the revenue line with our income tax. You can see the greenish line is our expenditures, and what we're trying to do is hone in on still trying to find some savings in different places so that we're not trying to, the 2% is not going to bring in the full revenue that we're going to need for this district. It's coming close though. And we feel that in looking at the different expenditures and what Mr. Kern had said about looking at the budgets and things, that we can pull that down together and make those meet.
As Mrs. Bradford mentioned, the 5-year forecast is a mandated document that, just to put it in perspective a little bit, during the 5-year forecast, we will go through a minimum of 3 biennial budgets that is established for us by lawmakers. Lawmakers who haven't always made the best decisions in regards to school funding. So therefore, we are put behind the 8 ball many times with planning certain things, and all of a sudden they get anything changed, or governor changes, or legislature changes, and it affects how that funding takes place from then on. So, but you can go ahead and have my soapbox. So.
No, that's good. I kind of explained it earlier, but it's a living document. For me, it's a living document because I'm looking at the trends monthly, I'm putting the actuals in monthly, and I'm checking to see if what we've decided as a board in that 5-year forecast for that fiscal year is looking correctly. Are we on trend? Are we falling behind? If we are, where are we? And so for me, it's a resource for the Board of Education and for the administration to be able to plan accordingly for future years. That's what it's supposed to be, as a planning document for us. The earned income is a 2% again, and the Department of Taxation certifies that, and they certified it at $3.2 million. So that's the full collection rate that we would be bringing in.
Which, if you recall, on the chart shows it approximately 2023 is before full, but 2022 before full collection. It's about 18 months from the time we start collection. So we start January. The next slide talks about we start collecting in 20. It would be mid-July 2021 before we'd be in full collection. Is that right?
We're going to get there.
Okay, go ahead. So we start collecting July of 2020.
Okay, so if it passes in November of 19, when does it start being collected? January 1 of 20. So then when do we receive all of that? So the first payment that we'll receive is April of 2020, and all that is the first part, January, February, and March. So if anyone pays their quarterly taxes, or if anyone has had the income tax start being withdrawn from their checks, that's the money that's going to be coming in. Okay, so we receive payments 4 times a year. We get one in January, we get one in April, July, and October. So each payment comes in for the amount collected those prior 3 months, and then the state retains 1.5% of that for their administration fees. So how it's collected, like I said, you get it through with employer withholdings, your individual quarterly estimated payments if you do that, and then most people usually pay theirs on the annual returns, especially unless they are having it withdrawn from their employers. I've gotten numerous calls in the years that I've been here saying maybe someone's gotten a refund and wants to know when I'm going to pay them back their refund, or they're a little late on their taxes but they promise they'll get it in to me. Can I make a note? I don't know how much you pay on your taxes. The school district does not know that. We do not collect them. The state of Ohio collects those taxes just like your state income tax, and then disperses it to the school district each quarter. We don't know who has paid. We don't know who paid what. We just get that disbursement for us. Okay. So when do we collect the full amount? Do we collect it in 19? No, because when the levy passes, it does not start getting collected until January 1 of 2020. So do we collect the full amount in 2020? Since it starts in 2020, don't we collect the full amount there? No, we don't. Again, the collections of this income tax does start January 1, but payments are slow. So what we figured is when I go in and do our estimates, the January 2020 payment covers October, November, and December of 19, so we will not be collecting anything at that point in time because you're not paying it at that time. April of 2020 payment covers the period of January, February, and March of 2020. We're estimating about $188,000. In July of 2020 payment covers April, May, and June of 2020. We're estimating about $518,000. And then October of 2020 covers the period of July, August, and September. We're figuring close to $495,000. These couple payments here are usually in the 20 to 22% of coming into us. So that's about our percentages there. So in the 2020 calendar year, we'll be getting about 1.2 million. And that's if our estimates are close with that. Again, it's going to depend on who pays, who's getting it withheld, who's paying annual taxes, and if anyone's paying any quarterly estimated payments. So a lot of it will depend on that. Okay? Our full amount, I always say think of it as a hill. It takes about, like Mr. Dick said, 18 months, year and a half for the district to receive the full amount. And so a lot of them come through those employer withholdings. But again, a lot of people just wait until their annual individual taxes to go ahead and pay those. So our first full year of collection will be the 21-22 school year, and it'll be more towards the 2022 end of that year where we're receiving the most of it.
Mr. Kern had mentioned this in his interlude about us collecting less than anyone in the district or in the county, and I think it clearly shows this. And I think it's something we should be very proud of, but at the same time, it shows a need. We obviously we had knowledge of how money's flowing. We could do things differently than we've done, and that's one of the reasons. Not knowing when the collection will be, if there will be a collection, you have to be very thoughtful of that spending process. And if you look at our income tax, obviously we're collecting nothing and haven't since we collected back taxes, I think, through the middle of 18, but obviously not the amount that it was during the time we were collecting through the end of 16. Our property tax is the lowest in the county, which down to the left, the total is the lowest.
So our property tax, and I'll kind of go through this on another slide. The property tax, the last time that we had a property tax go through was back in 1989, I believe it was. Right now, we use the property tax of a $100,000 house. The assessed value is $35,000, so that's why you're going to see that $35,000 up there. and then the number in between Amanda-Clearcreek and the 773, yes, that is our effective millage. So that's right now what we are paying. I've got another slide that'll explain that a little bit better. And I think it's something that needs to be explained, especially with our valuations that came through this summer. So cash balance, it's the total amount of money that we have in our accounts. It's calculated by what we receive and what we expend out, and then whatever we started with, it's added to that. So if it's positive cash balance, if your money is available, and it's a negative cash balance if there's nothing there and you're negative. So I did an example of a household. So on March 1st, you had $100 in your checking account. We all wish we had $100,000 in your checking account. You get paid $1,800 for that month. And between your bills, other items, you spent $1,850. So in March, that means that your cash balance at the end of March is $50. Because that's what you have left in your account. You started with 100, you gained 1,800, you spent 1,850, so $50 is what's left. That's a really simple cash balance analysis. So what I do, and explain to Mr. Dick, is a cash balance analysis. So we do it by fiscal year, and we do it as a cash percentage of expenditures. ODE also does this. You can go on. I took the definition of this from ODE. So the amount of cash a district has allows you to more easily manage. So you can usually your cash balance is for any unplanned events and short-term revenue loss, which we are hitting both of those, it seems, the past couple years. So levy cycles will a lot of times make a higher cash balance, and then when you're going into those wall years or you have a lot of unplanned events, then in other years it's going to be a low cash balance. So we also not only look year over year, but we also do a 5-year and kind of get the average from that. So yes, we do have a healthy cash balance, but because of our revenue loss from the prior income tax, we're having to really dip in by the millions into our cash balance to be able to help still operate our school district the way that we want to. Okay. So I went through and I pulled out school districts. I pulled out our Fairfield County and Pickaway, because that's around there. I know that ODE pulls out a lot of similar districts. But when you look at some of those similar districts, they're up in the northern part of the state. I like to look at the ones in our county and surrounding, especially Pickaway, for the mere fact that our economics are very similar to theirs. Our economics may not be the same as up in the Cleveland area. So that's what I like to look at. So I pulled a lot of them. And you'll see that in FY13, I've done it from FY13 all the way to FY18, and I pulled these from ODE, from their 5-year forecasts. So we're the only ones that I could get the FY19 on there because no one has filed their October forecast with their FY19 actuals. So you can see that we went up, and now we're coming back down to that 57.8 that Mr. Kern was talking about. And you can go and look through some of these other districts. This is something that the board is going to want to look at, because when we're trying to find that cash ceiling policy that we're looking, we want to be able to look and see about, what is the norm? What are we seeing other school districts doing? You can see, I've also pulled in an average and a median. So the average in most schools through all of these is going up. The average for FY18 is about 55.7. We got Westfall here at 90. Walnut Township's at 68. We got some in the 60s and 50s. So that's why I wanted to pull out the average and what the median is. So you can take a look at that, and we've got that on our website also. But this is something that we'll want to look at just because of and see what other school districts are also doing. What's the difference cash balance, a carryover, and a savings. So in my world, a cash balance is what you have left in your account at a certain period of time. For us, it's the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. A carryover is something that is postponed or extended. So we have a lot of encumbrances at the end of the year that's carried over, and our cash balance at the end there is also can be used for that next year. So it's carried over also. A savings account is just an account that is provided by a bank, and it's for, usually you put money in a savings account that's not part of your regular operational spending. So in your house, it's not something that you normally would have in your checking account to be able to pay the bills. And you normally get a higher interest rate on that. We don't have a savings account. I think that's the next one. We don't have a savings account, but we do invest in CDs and money markets to be able to make sure that we are getting a higher percentage rate to be able to get some interest back to help us with different projects that we have. We use some interest for the bleacher project. We've been going through and pulling interest out to earmark for our track project because our track is coming up every time someone runs on it. So those are things like that that we use for those CDs and interest.
Typically, we meet with our leadership team. We determine what the needs are, and then we will work with Mrs. Bradford and the Board of Education and as a leadership team to determine what becomes priority, what becomes necessities, and then from there we create that budget, 5-year forecast from those needs.
What has the school done to reduce costs and cut spending? So I will say that this is like an everyday thing that Mr. Dick and I do. We're constantly looking at purchase orders. We are looking at different ways to be able to save money. We are part of consortiums, so we have shared services, and we can share those services because, say for occupational therapy and physical therapy, we may not need one full OT, but Fairfield Union might need some, Walnut Township might need some, and so going through the ESC and sharing those services is a way for us to save money but still get that service. So we are part of consortiums, not only the ESC, but we go through META, and that's up in Columbus. That's part of our consortium. We get bus bids. They'll do the bus bids for the state. And if we pull, if a lot of the school districts pull together, we might be able to get a better discount on a bus per se. So we do a lot of the shared services for that. And we're constantly looking at contracts.
And administrators, teachers, all, especially in the 2 years I've come back, have been very thoughtful in the process about trying to suggest ways and things that we can do to save money.
And our vendors are very friendly to our schools in the fact that if they've been with us for a while, we can usually talk to them and try to get some additional savings in things when we're going in and negotiating. So one of the things Mr. Dick and I have been looking at is the ESC and some of our units that we have there for our special ed kiddos. And for this school year, we are saving approximately $100,000, and what we're doing is we just brought that unit back in to us, and we are fulfilling it instead of having the ESC do that. So those are things that we look at all the time to see if we can have some cost savings, but still provide that same service.
One of the biggest things we did in order to save money was enter into an energy program with Evans Energy to change out all our lights into LED lights. Guaranteed $92,000 a year savings. If we do not meet that $92,000, they write a check to us to make up for that difference. They've added new gas-fired water heaters in the kitchen. They've added fresh air exchanges on the air handlers, which has reduced the need for air all the time. And it was changed due to new laws when OFCC rewrote their guidelines that allowed us to change something out that was built in 2002 according to the guidelines, and it changed dramatically in regards to energy savings.
these are some of the things that we've done in the past couple years for 17-18 school year. We've restructured some federal grants. We did a copier savings with paper, with us going to Chromebooks. We've saved about $10,000 in paper and copies. In 18-19, we had some changes in staffing. We renegotiated a mowing contract and a copier contract, and actually that was a big year for our contracts. So we saved about $201,000 there. We just changed the transportation agreement from Canal Winchester down to Bern Union, and that was a $3,500 savings. In 1920, like I said, that hearing handicap unit, and so Title I benefit savings, we restructured that and pulled it out of our general fund into Title I. And so potential savings for this is about $229,000. So this is something that we're doing every year. We've done it for ever since I've been here. So.
And one thing you got to think about is picture this on a 5-year forecast.
Yeah.
When you save this in the 2019-20 school year, if you keep saving that for the next 5 years on your forecast, it will be on that number alone over $1 million savings. It changes the 5-year forecast that much.
Mm-hmm. And so that's sometimes when you look at the 5-year forecast. If we make one change this year, that $100,000 that we are saving this year, that $100,000 now is $500,000 savings out in 2023, the end of that school year. So, you know, a change for us this year compounds through and really makes a huge change at the end of that year. So those are things that we're constantly looking at also. State and federal funding, Mr. Dick talked about this with the state funding. O to be here in his time, I was still in high school, by the way, when you were, when he was in the 70%. This school year, we are frozen with the new budget at 57.4 for our state share. Basically, what that means is when the state gives us, say, $6,020, and they say that's how much we're going to give per student to educate them, we're only getting 57.4% of that $6,020. So that's when we talk about state share, that's our share of what the state is giving everyone overall. So in our federal funding, you can see in 10-11 school year, we were well over $1 million. We had an Ed Jobs grant. That was a federal grant. They no longer have that. And so that was pulled out to 19-20 school year. This year, we have received a restoration grant. That's an additional grant, but we're at $575,000. So we're even less than what we were last year too.
But you can see it's almost $600,000 less in a matter of 9 years, 10 years. And that affects our instruction in regards to the amount of Title I, reading recovery, those type of teachers that we've been able to provide, because if it doesn't come from there, then it comes from the general fund. So that's as simple as it can be. We don't have it coming in here, then we have to find that money from the general fund.
Or cut that
Or
program.
cut that program or that person.
So we've been asked about grants. We do receive grants. We've, besides our federal grants, we have local and state grants that have come through, and our teachers are great about trying to find different grants and things for in their classrooms. They're so creative. Some of the grants that we've had are the Straight A grant that we had locally with a bunch of different county schools, and that was through the ESC. They wrote that grant, and we participated in that. The Pine Grove Host Grant, our teachers are always putting in for that, and those come out two times a year. We've had an Ancestry Grant, Hostler